Welcome back to the deep dive. There's a certain kind of argument, a question really, that feels like it's just been on a loop since, I don't know, since we first started talking.
Oh, yeah.
It's the ultimate playground debate, but it's also this huge philosophical problem that everyone from like a toddler to a top academic eventually just runs straight into.
I think I know where you're going with this.
I'm talking, of course, about the chicken and the egg.
There it is! The paradox that just refuses to die. Which one came first? It sounds so simple, but it really does break your brain if you think about it for more than a few seconds.
It really does. And usually, when we bring it up, it's a joke. It's at a dinner party. It's a throwaway line to fill some silence.
Right. It's not serious.
But we're looking at a dialogue today where this question is, well, it's the furthest thing from a joke. It's actually the center of this really heated, dramatic, high-stakes argument between two university professors. And let me tell you, the gloves are off. They are not pulling any punches.
No, they certainly are. And that's what makes this whole exchange so gripping. Because on the surface, okay, yes, they're arguing about chickens, biology.
Right. Poultry.
But if you tune out the subject for a second and just listen to the way they're fighting, the specific words they're using, like weapons, they're not really arguing about chickens at all. They're fighting about the nature of truth itself.
That is exactly what I want to unpack today.
Mm-hmm.
This deep dive isn't really about farm animals. It's about the architecture of truth. How do we know what we know?
A fundamental question.
It is. When someone stands up and says, I have proof, what does that actually mean? We're going to dissect the vocabulary of certainty. We're going to look at the rigorous roadmap of discovery that we call research and see how all these concepts shape everything from, huge medical breakthroughs down to the reviews you read before you buy a new coffee maker.
It's really a mission to demystify that word research. I think for a lot of people, they hear that word and their eyes just glaze over.
Oh, for sure. Homework.
Exactly. They think of dusty libraries, lab coats, boring homework assignments. But as we see in this clash between the professors, research is actually dynamic. It's active. It can even be aggressive. It is the engine we use to solve problems and to answer the questions that keep us up at night.
So let's set the stage a little more. We have these two professors. They're locked in a room, metaphorically at least. One of them, let's call him the dogmatist, he's absolutely convinced he's right. He's not just saying, I have a theory.
No, it's way past theory for her.
He's throwing around some heavy artillery. Phrases like irrefutable data and conclusive evidence. And then on the other side, you have this skeptic who is just tearing that all apart, saying the whole investigative approach was flawed.
It's a total clash of worldviews, isn't it? You have one side that represents, sort of, the establishment of facts. This is true. Case closed. Stop talking.
Yeah, I've done the work. Listen to me.
And the other side represents that fundamental scientific duty to question the method. It's not about the answer. It's about how did you get there? How did you get those facts? Were you organized? Did you make a mistake? It's the ultimate battle between I know and how do you know?
I love that framing. I know.
Yeah.
Versus how do you know?
Yeah.
So let's dive into that first part then. The language of certainty.
Yeah.
Because when you're in a debate, especially a formal academic one, the words you choose they're strategic. And the first weapon that our dogmatist pulls out is this word, irrefutable.
That is a massive word to just drop into a conversation.
Yeah.
Irrefutable.
It sounds like a fortress. It sounds like a wall you can't possibly climb.
It essentially is. And, that's both its power and its danger. When a researcher or professor says their data is irrefutable, they're not just saying it's good. They're saying it cannot be denied. Period. They are claiming it is absolutely true. This isn't a good guess. It's not a strong hypothesis. It's a fact that you cannot argue against. If something is irrefutable, there is zero possibility of it being a lie or even an accident, a mistake.
But hang on a second. I mean, I feel like in science, or even just in arguments with friends, people rarely have ground that solid.
Yeah.
Is anything truly irrefutable? I mean, isn't gravity still technically the theory of gravity? Using a word like that feels almost arrogant.
It is incredibly arrogant, and that's why it elevates the tension in this dialogue so much. In the scientific community, using a word like irrefutable it's like the nuclear option.
Right.
You're not just saying you're right, you're signaling that the debate is over. You're claiming absolute, unquestionable authority. And what that does, paradoxically, is it actually invites deeper scrutiny. Because if the skeptic can find just one tiny crack in that irrefutable wall,
the whole thing comes crumbling down.
the whole argument shatters because you've claimed perfection. conclusion.
It's a very high-risk, high-reward strategy then. And he backs it up with another one of these heavyweight phrases. Conclusive evidence. Now, we hear evidence all the time, cop shows, courtrooms. But what's the extra weight he's adding by calling it conclusive?
Well, think about the root word there. Conclusion. A conclusion is the end, right? It's the final judgment. So evidence can be lots of things. It can be suggestive. It might hint at something. It can be compelling. It's pretty convincing. It makes you lean in a certain direction. But conclusive evidence is the proof that leads you directly to that final decision without any detours. It closes the case.
Okay, so it's a smoking gun.
It's the smoking gun, the confession, and the fingerprints all rolled into one. If the evidence is truly conclusive, you can't really argue with the result. It leads, as he says, to a definitive conclusion.
Definitive conclusion. Okay, that sounds like the final nail in the coffin.
Exactly. A definitive conclusion is a judgment that cannot be argued with or changed. It is final. So you can see the posture this professor is taking. He's building this wall of words, irrefutable, conclusive, definitive.
Stacking them up.
He's trying to make his position on the chicken and the egg completely unassailable. He wants the other guy to just give up and go home.
And to justify all that confidence, all that arrogance, he claims he's done the work. He mentions his extensive research. Now, this is a phrase I hear a lot. Usually when someone tells me they've done extensive research on something, it means they spent 3 hours on Wikipedia.
Right, and that's the trap, isn't it? Extensive here is meant to be a quantifier of effort. It's supposed to imply depth and breadth. He's saying he hasn't just done a quick Google search or looked at one book. Extensive means he has studied this thoroughly from every angle, looked things up repeatedly, and covered a massive amount of ground.
So he's almost using volume as a weapon.
Precisely. He is claiming that the quantity of his work validates the quality of his answer. He's essentially saying, I've read 5,000 pages on this, I've run 100 tests, therefore I cannot possibly be wrong.
But, and this is where all the drama kicks in, the skeptic just isn't buying it. Yeah. He doesn't seem to care how extensive the research was if the method itself was bad. He counters with the vocabulary of the flaw. And his favorite word seems to be, well, quite literally flawed.
Flawed is such a critical concept in research, and it's a devastating word to have applied to your study. It comes from the noun flaw, which is, a mistake, a crack, an imperfection.
Like a diamond with a flaw.
That's the perfect analogy. If you buy a diamond with a scratch inside, it's a flawed diamond. It's less valuable. In research, if your experiment is flawed, it means there's an error in the structural integrity of how you set it up. The whole thing is compromised.
So it's like building a beautiful house, but on a crooked foundation. It doesn't matter how nice the furniture is or how irrefutable the data looks. If the foundation is cracked, the whole house is condemned.
Precisely. You could have the most beautiful, compelling charts and graphs in the world, but if they came from a flawed experiment, the data is useless. It's garbage. And the skeptic specifically attacks the investigative approach.
Let's unpack that phrase for a second. Investigative approach. It sounds like something out of a detective novel.
And it is, really. Investigate is the verb, to look into something, to examine it. Investigative is the adjective describing the nature of that action. An approach is your methodology, the way you handle a problem, the path you take.
Okay.
So when he criticizes the investigative approach, he's not just criticizing the answer, he's going a level deeper. He's criticizing the specific way the problem was studied. He's saying, you didn't just get the wrong answer, you asked the question the wrong way from the very beginning.
And specifically, he says the data collection was not systematic. Now, systematic is a word that gets thrown around in, corporate meetings all the time. We need a systematic solution. It feels like a buzzword sometimes. Mm-hmm. Does it actually mean anything concrete here?
Oh, it's probably the most important word in the entire room. A system implies order, a process. Being systematic means you are following that process, a strict order, a rigid set of rules. You're organized.
So it's repeatable.
It's repeatable. That's the key. You don't just grab data randomly from wherever you find it. You follow a step-by-step path that anyone else in the world could follow to check your work. If your research isn't systematic, it's chaotic. And if it's chaotic, it's unreliable. Because you can't tell if your result was caused by your theory or just by random chance.
So if I'm counting chickens, to use our example, right. Being systematic means I count them at the exact same time every day, in the exact same way, writing it down in the same logbook.
Right.
Being unsystematic would be like I count them whenever I feel like it. Maybe I miss a few one day, maybe I count one twice the next.
Exactly. And if you're unsystematic, your irrefutable data is just noise. It's meaningless.
This battle of ideas, this irrefutable certainty versus systematic skepticism, it gets surprisingly personal, too. The skeptic calls the dogmatist's claim preposterous. I love that word. It's so theatrical. It feels like something a 19th century aristocrat would shout while slamming a cane on the floor.
It's a wonderful word, isn't it? It means absurd, ridiculous. It's a very fancy, high-impact way of just saying, that doesn't make any sense. But notice the shift in the argument. He's not just attacking the data anymore.
That's a good point.
He's attacking the logic itself. He's saying the core idea is so silly, it's not even worth serious consideration. It's a dismissal, a wave of the hand.
And then he delivers what feels like the final insult. He says the other professor is oblivious to the fact that he's wrong. That feels like a direct shot at his professional competence.
It is. To be oblivious is to be unaware. It means you are either willfully ignoring the facts or you literally cannot see what is right there in front of your face.
Like being oblivious to a giant puddle you're about to walk into.
Exactly. If you're walking down the street looking at your phone and you almost step in that puddle, you're oblivious to it. In this context, he's saying the dogmatist is so obsessed with his own theory, so in love with his own irrefutable conclusions, that he has blinded himself. He cannot see his own enormous errors.
It's high drama over chickens and eggs. It's amazing how much aggression can be packed into polite academic language.
Well, that's the thing about truth, isn't it? People get very, very territorial about it.
And speaking of chickens, the dialogue does give us a little bit of a breather from this intense academic wrestling match. They drop in the classic English joke. You know the one, why did the chicken cross the road?
To get to the other side.
The ultimate anticlimax joke. It's so simple. But in the middle of all this talk about irrefutable data and systematic flaws, why is that joke there? Is it just for comic relief?
I think it serves a dual purpose. On one hand, yes, absolutely, it's a moment of levity. It breaks the tension. But I think it's also a subtle reminder that sometimes we overcomplicate things. We build these massive, elaborate intellectual structures. We look for deep philosophical reasons, the architecture of the universe, when sometimes the cause is simple. Motivation, utility. To get to the other side, it kind of brings us back down to earth. Because while these professors are arguing about the philosophy of existence, most of us just want to know how things work in the real world so we can get on with our lives.
Which is actually the perfect transition to our second segment.
Yeah.
We've looked at the language of the argument, the tactical vocabulary. Now let's look at the actual substance. What is research, really? Because the definition we're working with here is pretty broad. It says research is the process of finding new information, answering questions, and solving problems.
And that is the core definition. And I want to strip away all the academic baggage for a second. Research isn't just for people with PhDs in ivory towers. It's a tool. I would even argue it's the fundamental survival mechanism of our species.
That's a big claim.
Well, think about it. It's how we learn about the world, whether that's ancient history or modern medicine or technology or the universe itself. It's how we move from I don't know to I know. It's how we learned which berries were poisonous and which were safe. That was early research.
So let's break down the different, flavors of research, because it seems like there's a whole spectrum of inquiry here. On one end, you have the heavy hitters, the hard sciences.
Right. Scientific research. This is what we typically think of when we hear the word. It focuses on the natural world. It encompasses everything from technology to human health. So you have physicists exploring the fundamental laws of the universe, trying to understand gravity or time. You have biologists in a rainforest studying ecosystems. This is research where the ultimate goal is to discover the basic laws of nature.
And very closely related to that, almost a subset of it, is medical research. This feels like the one with the highest, most immediate stakes for us personally.
Oh, absolutely. Medical research is explicitly about saving human lives. It involves testing new medicines, studying viruses, improving surgical techniques. Think about the decades of work that went into developing vaccines or finding treatments for cancer or even just understanding how cholesterol affects the heart.
And this is a field where irrefutable data is actually like life or death necessary.
It is the goal. You can't have flawed research when you're testing a new heart medication. The standards have to be incredibly high because the consequences of being wrong are catastrophic.
Then there's environmental research. This feels very current, very urgent.
It is. And it's a field that's grown incredibly important over the last 50 years. This type of research focuses on nature, the climate, and our ecosystems. We're talking about studying air pollution, deforestation, global warming. The example of studying plastic pollution in the oceans is a great one. Researchers are out on boats, they're using submersibles, they're analyzing samples to figure out where all this plastic is coming from and what it's doing to marine life. The goal here is usually protection, finding ways to conserve water, save a species, or slow down climate change. It's diagnostic. It tells us how sick the planet is and maybe, just maybe, how to fix it.
So that's the hard science side, the world of labs and data and measurements.
Yeah.
But the discussion also highlights the humanities and the social sciences. And this is where I think some people get a bit skeptical. They say, is that really research? Or is it just, reading old books and having opinions?
That's a very common misconception, but the rigor required is just as high, even if the methods are different. Take historical research. This is the study of past events, people, and cultures. And yes, it involves reading old books, but the methodology is about more than just reading. You're looking at old letters, newspapers, government archives, artifacts from an archaeological dig.
So the artifact is the data point.
The artifact is the data. The letter is the data. A historian has to piece together a coherent story from thousands of these fragmented, often contradictory pieces of data. It's detective work on a grand scale.
But playing devil's advocate for a second, why does that matter as much as, say, curing a disease? Why do we need to put so much effort into researching the Roman Empire in the 21st century?
Because it helps us understand context. Historical research helps us see how societies change over time. It shows us how decisions made hundreds or thousands of years ago are still influencing where we are today. You can't understand the present political landscape in Europe, for example, without researching the history of the world wars.
Or even the Roman Empire.
And a more practical example, understanding how the 1918 flu pandemic was handled, what public health measures worked, what mistakes were made. That was absolutely vital data for medical researchers and policymakers dealing with COVID-19. History is the data set of human experience.
That makes perfect sense. It's a long-term study of human behavior. And that brings us to social research, which is basically studying us right now.
Right. This is the domain of sociologists and psychologists. They're looking at contemporary human behavior, cultures, and societies. The example of studying how children learn in different environments is a great one, or how people react to advertisements, or how social media affects mental health.
So it's about understanding the software of humanity, not just the biological hardware.
That's a great way to put it. You can build a technologically perfect city, but if you don't understand how people actually interact, how they form communities, how they move through public space, the city will fail. Social research tries to fill that gap.
And speaking of learning, there's a specific subset called educational research,
which is vital for our schools and universities. This type of research aims to improve teaching methods. Researchers might set up a study comparing online learning versus traditional classroom learning to see which one is actually more effective for a particular subject.
So it's research about how to transfer knowledge more effectively.
Exactly. Are we teaching kids the right way? Is there a better way? If we don't research that, we're just guessing, and we could be wasting the potential of an entire generation.
Now, there's one last category here that I think secretly drives a lot of the modern world, even if we don't always realize it. Commercial or market research.
This is the business side of things. Market research is done by companies, big and small, to understand their customers. Your needs, my needs, our preferences.
This is why my smartphone is the exact size and weight that it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or why the Buy Now button on a website is always that specific shade of orange.
Exactly. They don't just guess. They use surveys, interviews, focus groups, A/B testing, product testing. A car company will spend millions researching what kind of cup holder people want. A food company will research what kind of snack is popular in a specific neighborhood before they stock the shelves.
So it's research with a clear profit motive.
It is, but it's still using that same systematic approach to gather data. They want their sales predictions to be as irrefutable as possible because millions of dollars are on the line.
So, okay, it seems like whether you're trying to cure a disease, understand the fall of Rome, or sell a better smartphone, you're doing research. But, and this is the key point from our professor's argument, you can't just wing it. You can't just be investigative without being systematic.
Correct. There is a roadmap, a generally accepted process of discovery. And if you don't follow the map, you get lost. And your conclusions are, well, they're flawed.
So let's walk through that roadmap. I want to move away from the abstract for a bit. Let's pick a real-world scenario. Let's Let's say we want to investigate why the local river in our town has suddenly turned a weird shade of green and all the fish are disappearing.
A classic environmental mystery, perfect example. High stakes, real-world problem.
Okay, so step 1 in the roadmap seems obvious, but I guess it's maybe the hardest. Choosing a topic.
It is the hardest because you have to be specific. You can't just wake up and say, I'm going to research nature. That's way too big. You can't even just say, I'm going to research the river. In our scenario, you have to narrow it down even more. I'm going to research the cause of the sudden algal bloom and subsequent fish die-off in the Mill River during the month of August 2024.
So the rule is, the topic has to be specific, clear, and meaningful. Okay, we have our specific problem. Step 2, asking questions.
Research always begins with a question that needs an answer. This is what anchors your entire project. If you don't have a guiding question, you're just wandering around looking at green water.
You're just collecting facts with no purpose.
Precisely. So your primary question might be, what is the cause of the algal bloom? And then you might have sub-questions. Is the green color caused by chemical dumping from the old factory upstream? Or is it caused by rising water temperatures from the recent heat wave? Or is it fertilizer runoff from the farms nearby? Now you have targets. You have hypotheses to test.
Okay, we have our targets. Step 3 involves getting out of your chair, or at least hitting the library or the computer, gathering information.
This is the collection phase, often called the literature review. It's crucial. You aren't testing the water yourself yet. First, you need to find out what is already known. So you're pulling from scientific journals, government environmental reports, university websites, interviews with other ecologists, past studies on this specific river.
You're building on the work of others.
Always. You need to know. Has this happened here before? What do the satellite images from last year look like? What specific chemicals does that factory use? What does an algae bloom caused by heat look like versus one caused by phosphates and fertilizer?
And the crucial distinction here, and this goes right back to our arguing professors, is that you absolutely must use reliable sources.
Exactly. This is non-negotiable. You can't just read a blog post from davesriverconspiracytheory.com. You need those government reports, the peer-reviewed university studies, the expert interviews. You need trustworthy foundations or, as we said, the whole house collapses before you even start building.
Okay, so we've read the books, we've done our homework, we know what to look for. Step 4 is where the action happens. Conducting experiments and surveys.
This is where you generate your own new data. In our river example, this is where you put on the waders. You get in the boat, you go out into the water, you take physical water samples from right next to the factory's discharge pipe, you take samples from a mile upstream as a control, you take samples from a mile downstream.
And you have to be systematic about it.
Perfectly systematic.
Yeah.
You check the water at the same time every day for 2 weeks. You use the same sterile bottles. You measure the water temperature at a consistent depth. You log every single detail. You follow a strict protocol so that your data is clean.
And if this were, say, market research, this step would be sending out the survey to 5,000 people.
Right. Or if it were medical research, this is the clinical trial where one group gets a new drug and the other group gets a placebo. It's the moment you actively confront reality and ask it to give you fresh data.
Once you have that pile of data, all your water sample test results, all those temperature readings, you move to step 5, analyzing the data.
And this is where the real discovery often happens. This is where you look for the story that the numbers are trying to tell you. You're looking for patterns, for trends, for correlations, for facts. You put all your data into a spreadsheet or a statistical program.
And what might you find?
Well, for instance, maybe you find that the levels of chemicals from the factory are actually well below the legal limit in all your samples. That's a finding. But maybe you also see that the water temperature downstream is consistently 10 degrees higher than normal for this time of year. You've just identified a clear pattern through analysis.
And that leads to the big moment, the payoff. Step 6, drawing conclusions. This is that definitive conclusion our professor was so obsessed with.
This is where you interpret the analysis. You decide what the information tells us. Based on your analysis, you might conclude, the factory appears innocent. The data strongly suggests that the recent unprecedented heat wave has raised the river's temperature, creating the perfect conditions for an algal bloom, which in turn depleted the oxygen in the water and suffocated the fish.
You've taken all the raw data and you've turned it into a judgment, an answer to your question.
An evidence-based judgment. And a good researcher will also note the limitations. They might say, while the evidence points to the heat wave, further research is needed on fertilizer runoff. You have to be honest about what you don't know too.
Finally, step 7, And this is so important. You don't just write your conclusion in a diary and hide it. You have to be sharing results.
Science and research are communal activities. If you solve the mystery of the Green River but you tell no one, you haven't really completed the process. So you write reports, you publish articles in scientific journals, maybe you present your findings at a conference or to the local town council.
And the purpose is to let others learn from what you found.
Yes, and to allow them to challenge it. Someone else can now try to replicate your study. Maybe a town 3 states over has the same problem, and your published report helps them solve it faster. It's how we build the collective knowledge of humanity, brick by brick.
It sounds so clean and orderly when we list the steps like that. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Science. But as our arguing professors showed us at the start, the reality of research is often messy. It's full of hurdles and challenges.
Oh, huge hurdles. The first and most constant one is reliability. As we said, not all sources are trustworthy. We live in an age of misinformation. Some sources are biased, some are just plain incorrect. Maybe that first report you read about the factory being safe was actually written and paid for by the factory's PR firm.
So you have to be a skeptic yourself.
A researcher has to be a professional skeptic. They have to constantly check and cross-reference multiple sources to ensure they aren't building their work on bad ground. It's a constant battle.
And it just takes so much time. A lot of time and a lot of effort. A simple study like our river one could take months. Major scientific research can take years, even decades. If you're tracking the long-term effects of a certain diet on heart disease, you might need 30 or 40 years of data from thousands of people. It requires a level of patience that most people, frankly, don't have.
And it requires resources.
Money, equipment, travel. Research is not free. That fancy machine that tests your water samples costs thousands of dollars. You need funding, usually from governments or private companies or foundations. And that brings us to the most dangerous and complex hurdle of all, the moral compass, the ethics of research.
We kind of touched on this with our oblivious professor. If he's so in love with his idea that he's ignoring facts that contradict it, is that an ethical failure?
It absolutely is. Honesty is the bedrock of all research. It's non-negotiable. Researchers must not lie about their findings. They must not change the data to fit their opinions. If the data says your beautiful, elegant theory is wrong, if the water samples say the factory is innocent, but you hate that factory with a passion, you have to report that the factory is innocent.
That's got to be hard for people. We all have confirmation bias. We all want to be proven right.
We do. But authentic research demands that we put the pursuit of truth above our own ego. It's a discipline, a tough one.
What about when the research isn't on water but on people?
Then the ethical stakes get even higher. You have the issue of participant rights. When you study human behavior, you have to respect people's privacy and their dignity. You must ask for permission, what we call informed consent.
Which means they know what they're signing up for.
Exactly. You can't just spy on people through their webcams to see what detergent they buy. You can't experiment on people without telling them exactly what the experiment is and what the potential risks are. History is filled with absolute horror stories where this rule was ignored, and we have very strict international rules now because of that dark past.
And safety in general, too.
Right. Protecting animals and the environment during testing. You can't destroy the river ecosystem while you're trying to study it. The principle is do no harm. You have to leave the world and the people and animals in it as you found it, and hopefully a little better off because of the knowledge you've created.
It's a really heavy responsibility. But before we get too bogged down in the purely academic side of this, I want to bring it back to the listener, because the discussion makes this really empowering point. We are all everyday researchers.
We are. We might not wear lab coats or publish in journals, but we use the exact same mental process every single day. Think about it. When you are about to buy a new laptop, what do?
I panic first because there are too many options. But then, I go online, I read reviews from 5 different tech sites, I watch those teardown videos on YouTube to see how well it's built. I compare the prices across 3 different stores.
That is consumer research. You are choosing a topic, new laptop. You are asking questions. Which one has the best battery life? You are gathering information. Step 3. You are analyzing data, the reviews versus the price, and you are drawing a conclusion, clicking buy on that specific laptop. You are being investigative.
Or bigger life decisions, deciding where to go on vacation, looking for a new job.
Parents finding good schools for their children, that is some of the most extensive research anyone ever does. You're looking at test scores, you're reading parent testimonials, you're visiting campuses, talking to teachers and other parents.
You're trying to find conclusive evidence that this school is a safe and good place for your kid.
Exactly. You are using the full investigative approach to improve your own life and the lives of your family. You are being systematic.
And we have these incredible tools now that make this easier than it has ever been in human history. Search engines, online libraries, access to databases.
But the caveat remains, and it's a big one. You have to check if the information is true. Just because it's the top result on Google doesn't mean it's irrefutable. In fact, in the age of the internet and social media, the skill of being a skeptic, of asking, is this source reliable? Who paid for this study? What's their angle? That skill is more important than it has ever been.
So we have to be both the dogmatist and the skeptic in our own lives.
That's the balance. Be open to new information, but always question its source.
Looking ahead then, the discussion touches on the future of this whole landscape. How is technology changing the game of research?
It's accelerating it at a pace we've never seen before. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is playing a massive role. It can analyze huge data sets faster than any team of humans ever could. It can spot patterns in medical scans or genetic code in seconds that would take a human researcher a lifetime to find.
So in our river scenario,
an AI could analyze daily satellite imagery of that river going back 10 years and pinpoint the exact day the green color started to appear and correlate it with weather patterns and shipping traffic. It's an incredibly powerful tool for analysis.
That's amazing. But does it replace the human element? Does the researcher become obsolete?
I don't think so. Because AI can process data, but it can't, at least not yet, understand context or ethics. It doesn't have a moral compass. It can find a correlation, but it can't tell you if it's a meaningful one. We still need humans to ask the right questions in the first place and to interpret the answers with wisdom.
And we're building more advanced tools for the big stuff, too.
Absolutely. Exploring space, curing diseases, we are constantly building better eyes and ears to study the universe. The James Webb Space Telescope is essentially a giant research tool that's allowing us to look back in time almost to the beginning of the universe. And in education, things like virtual classrooms and online global learning platforms are shaping how we communicate and learn. The way we do research and the way we learn are evolving hand in hand.
It really is amazing to think about. We started with this seemingly silly ancient argument about a chicken and an egg, and we've ended up discussing the very tools that might cure cancer or take us to Mars.
That is the power of research. That's the arc. It bridges that gap between simple, everyday curiosity and profound, world-changing knowledge. It's the process that turns "I wonder" into "I know."
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's just recap the journey. We watched two professors duke it out over irrefutable data versus flawed methods. We learned that words like conclusive and systematic aren't just academic jargon. They're the very standards we use to measure truth.
We saw that research happens absolutely everywhere, from the dusty history books to the sterile medical lab to the marketing department of a smartphone company. It is the invisible infrastructure of the modern world.
And we walked step by step through that research roadmap using our mystery of the Green River. Choosing a specific topic, asking the right questions, gathering reliable info, analyzing it systematically, and then sharing what you've learned.
And finally, and maybe most importantly, we realized that we are all researchers in our daily lives, navigating a world that's flooded with information, and that it's our job to verify it for ourselves.
So here's a final provocative thought for you to chew on, something to mull over as you go about your week. The professors presented us with this conflict, where one of them called an opposing idea preposterous, ridiculous, absurd. But history is absolutely littered with preposterous ideas that turned out to be true.
That's such a great point. Germ theory was considered preposterous. The idea that invisible creatures could make you sick, doctors laughed at it. The suggestion that they should wash their hands between patients was seen as an insult.
Right. The idea that the Earth goes around the sun was considered absolute heresy, a preposterous claim that could get you killed. Human flight was considered a biological and physical impossibility for centuries.
Plate tectonics, the idea that the very continents we stand on are moving, that was ridiculed by the scientific establishment until the mid-20th century.
So if this process of research allows us to solve tangible problems like traffic congestion or river pollution or disease, I want you to ask yourself this. What is a preposterous idea today? Something that everyone you know laughs at. Something that seems completely impossible right now. that might be proven irrefutable tomorrow through the power of systematic research.
And maybe more personally, are you oblivious to a truth that's sitting right there in front of you just because you haven't done the research yet?
Apply that investigative approach to your own life and your own beliefs. Don't just take things for granted because someone said so. Dig a little deeper. Be systematic. You might be surprised by what you find. Thanks for listening to this deep dive.
Keep asking questions.
See you next time.